Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where we cultivate change from the inside out as we ponder the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? We stand on the belief that dismantling racism goes beyond laws and legislation or politics and economics. Here, anti-racism activation is presented as an inside job where personal transformation and accountability impact social change. So take a seat at the anti-racism activation table with Inflection Point Podcast.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of Inflection Point Podcast, where we are dedicated to the art of listening and authentic conversation. We challenge our audience to listen actively and intentionally for the purpose of critical self-reflection, in-depth perspective taking, personal transformation, and ultimately social impact. So our 2024 theme has been the art of community conversation in today's climate of systemic and institutional racism, anti-racism activation, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and book banning. And I am your host, Anita Russell, and here's a quick hello from co-host Mavis and Gail.
Hi, everybody. It's Mavis Bauman.
Hi, I'm Gail Hunter.
Well, a lot has certainly happened since our last episode. And in the last episode, if you caught that, we had a discussion on the Precipice of Change, which is a book that is written by Toby Ord, Senior Research Fellow at the Future of Humanity Institute in Oxford. And so in that discussion, we talked about some of the elements of that book, but we also talked about Project 2025, its legacy, and its opposition. So in today's episode, we continue our discussion in the spirit of change, freedom, opportunity, and justice being the focal point of the change, this place of change where we are right now. So I mentioned the book, Precipice of Change. And in that book, there are 5 specific principles that really talk about change and talking about existentialism and all these different things. But what I did was I just pulled out 3 that I think are particularly relevant to what's happening right now. Right. And so the first one is societal coordination and global cooperation. Just kind of let that phrase marinate for a minute. Societal coordination and global cooperation. And this is kind of related to the idea of collective challenges. And we are in a place right now of collective challenges, but it's collective challenges that call for a unified approach and consideration of multiple variables, diverse variables, if you will, and their effects of policies, unequal allocation of resources, diversity of cultural values. So all of those types of ideas are embedded in this element of societal coordination and global cooperation. And then the second one is the moral value. I love this one. The moral values of humanity's long-term potential. And what that means is every single one of us, every individual in every era adds to the evolution of our legacy of advancement and wisdom that is unique and precious. So each one of us does, in fact, bring something unique into the conversation, into the space of that conversation, into the interactions that are occurring in that conversations and the resulting actions associated with that conversation. But then here is my absolute favorite. Ethical responsibilities to future generations. If you listen closely to the intro to our podcast, we ask a question, and that question is centered around a 4-year-old little kid And that 4-year-old little kid, when he was born, was part of the impetus for this program that we are doing and this approach to Inflection Point Podcast. And so that ethical responsibility to future generations means that decisions of the present will influence future lives. And I think as we think about the space that we're in right now with the election and all of these things that are in the news today, whatever the outcome is over the course of the next 100 days or so is going to have a dramatic impact on the future of that 4-year-old little boy, rather, that we've been talking about. And not only that particular little boy, but hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of children that are going to be impacted by the decisions that we as adults are making today. And so I want to call your attention to James Tallarico. He is the Texas Senate representative, and he has a Master of Divinity. And a lot of where he comes from, so he's a politician, but he's also a man of God. And so when I say man of God, I'm talking a Bible believer, someone who brings the word of God into the conversation, but not forcefully and demandingly. So not the same as, like, for example, Christian nationalists. He comes from a very different perspective. He comes from the perspective of really understanding the word of God and really understanding how does it play out, or what role does it play in the conversations and everything that we are having right now. And one of the things that I really, really like about him is that he looks at the political divide, if you will, but he realizes and emphasizes that that political divide is not left or right. It's actually top versus bottom. So it's moving away from this idea of simply looking at us as these two camps, one on the right, one on the left. But it's actually the top versus the bottom. And what that brings into the conversation is the whole idea of grassroots movement, which is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about that throughout the course of this show. We've been talking about the importance of this grassroots movement. And I think between last Sunday and this past Sunday, we saw a lot of that grassroots movement, like unprecedented grassroots movement, which is very exciting when I think about the future of my grandson, Cairo. And I'd like to add Gail's grandson, Noah, in this conversation as well, because we do this work for those children who are innocent. They have no idea what's going on. And I feel like we are obligated, as the ones who do know what's going on, to make the right choices, to make the right decisions. And I say that within that spirit of those three items that I mentioned earlier: freedom, opportunity, and justice, because those children deserve the best that we can possibly create for them, so that they can in turn have a legacy that they pass along. And so we're talking about the rise of Kamala Harris, right? And what has happened over the course of the last week really, really speaks to the power. And I would even go so far as to say almost the invisible power of grassroots movement. Because we know, we talk to our family, we talk to our friends, we know that there are individuals out there that are scratching their heads like, what in the world is going on? I'm trying to figure out am I here? Am I there? What is the choice I'm going to make? But then when that groundswell came up, it created the reality that there is power in grassroots movement, which I so am grateful to James Tallarico in the way that he breaks it out, that it really is top versus bottom. And so we got a lot of power that's rising up from the bottom, and we're going to have to take advantage of this moment in history right now. Mavis, Gail, comments?
I've been collecting a few since you started. Just with reference to the principles of being on the precipice of change, the idea that it's a collective challenge reminds me that we often think that doesn't affect me, or I can't affect what's happening. And I really want to encourage, listeners to think about how they can participate in these challenges rather than shrug them off. And sometimes it's just for a season, right? It's not for your whole life, but any little action helps. The other thing I liked was that our voices, the moral value of humanity's long-term potential, is both unique and precious. Think about the word precious. That, again, flies in the face of, I can't do anything about it. We are our collective selves. So I love the idea of power in that. And then I am just wild about James Tallarico now. He's really going viral. And the idea that it's not left versus right, it is about power, top versus bottom. And there are people of all shades of all skin colors on both levels. So this, takes it away from vilifying the other. We have access to power, even if we're on the bottom, in terms of by acting as a collective. Yeah, so those things are really exciting to me. Anybody who gets a chance to listen to Tallarico, YouTube him. He's fabulous.
Amen. Gail?
Yeah, I'd like to share something about the top versus bottom, right versus left. That as a therapist, and I've worked an awful lot with trauma, that what I've learned over the decades of my work with people is that to really heal from trauma, we have to heal from the bottom up, not the top down. And so and that's why I love that mentioning of that, because this country is in a place where we are very divided, and there are many divisive inputs in trying to increase that. And so what I want everybody to realize is that we have to heal at that bottom level. And that's that grassroots level. That's where you and I, we all live and experience life. And and part of what we have to do is we have to vote, right? We have to choose. And we want to be very cautious and aware and conscious of what choice we're making, because that is going to affect the future generations. My grandchildren, your grandchildren, your children, any person that is younger than any of us are, right? And so we have a responsibility to them. But we can, when we allow ourselves to heal from the bottom up, we find a way not just to find power, but to empower ourselves and empower our beliefs and empower our values. And that's where you're going to see change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Both of you, thank you for those incredible remarks. Now let's take some time to kind of really dig into this rise of Kamala Harris and that power of the grassroots movement. So at this point, I'm going to pass the baton over to Gail, and she's going to share some history on what is called the Divine Nine, and how that relates directly to the rise of Kamala Harris and this whole power of grassroots movement.
Yeah. So Kamala Harris is vying to become the first Black woman president. Both, right? She's Black and Asian. And she is also, according to the sorority fraternity history, she's also the first member of any historical Black fraternity or sorority to ever hold that position. She graduated from Howard University in '86, and she had a degree in, I believe, international, she had a degree in, I forget what her degree, I must have deleted it, but anyways, she most of all graduated as at her senior year as a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, one of the Divine Nine. the sorority, the AKA, which was founded at Howard University, part of that Divine Nine, it's a group of 9 historically Black sororities and fraternities, and the huge, vast network that goes across this country and internationally. BGLO is what refers to the Black Greek letter organizations, and these are the 5 fraternities and 4 sororities, and they are members of the National Pan-Hellenic Council. The National Pan-Hellenic Council was established in the Jim Crow era, and that was when Greek letter collegiate organizations founded by white Americans who didn't want to be affiliated with Greek letter collegiate organizations that were founded by African Americans. So the NPHC was formed as a permanent organization in 1930 on the campus of Howard University in Washington, D.C. The National Pan-Hellenic Council is a collaborative umbrella council composed of historically African American fraternities and the stories, referred to as the Divine Nine, and they have done an amazing job over the decades in so many different ways. And right now they are organizing and contributing to Kamala Harris's campaign in some very fascinating ways. Their purpose, the Divine Nine, is the unanimity of thought and action as far as possible in the conduct of Greek letter collegiate fraternities and sororities, and to consider problems of mutual interest to its member organizations. There are over 2.5 million members that are part of this organization, and that includes older adults, middle adults, and young people. Black organizations are actually nonpartisan and nonprofit, so they can't endorse any candidate. But the individual students and alumni involved are throwing their support behind Harris's campaign. And many of the AKE, or the Alpha Kappa Alpha, which she is a member, convened on a Zoom call, which I can't even imagine this one, a Zoom call of 44,000 people for the group Win with Black Women, which met the day Biden dropped out of the race. They raised $1.5 million for the Harris campaign in one sitting, the New York Times reported. The Zoom-inspired similar calls have raised millions of dollars in addition to that for Harris. What they had to go through to get 44,000 people on one Zoom call, they did it as a webinar, but they had to jump through an awful lot of hoops, but they did it. So I want you to remember that, because that's really that's part of who they are, is that they will do anything for anyone that's a member, but also for the community and what they believe in. They are that dedicated to each other and to the larger communities that they live in. The founding members of the NPHC were the Alpha Kappa Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Delta Sigma Theta, and Zeta Phi Beta. The council's membership expanded in 1931 and included Alpha Phi Alpha, and 31. They also included Phi Beta Sigma. Sigma Gamma Rho in 37, and Lambda Phi Theta was in 1996. They joined. So, Black excellence is nothing new for the Sisters of the AKA. They always keep trying to achieve and strive for excellence. The Divine Nine is supporting efforts for all Americans to vote. What we really care about, they said, is getting out the vote, voter registration, voter education, and voter empowerment. There are people who cannot vote, and it's important for all of us to come together. And one of the most brilliant things I think I read that they're doing that is so simple is that they're inviting members of the congregation to come downstairs after church service and register to vote. And they're providing the assistance and whatever is needed in order for them to accomplish that, which is a great way of looking at that, right? There's so many ways we can help people be able to vote. People that may not be able to have access to transportation, but they have a ride to church and they can stay and do that.
An easy action for people to do. That's fabulous.
Right. It's so easy, right? And they're right there. It's convenient. It's comfortable. It feels safe for them, and they feel supported. Now the votes are being. Peter Logan said that he's a George Washington University professor. So the voters are coveted by both Democrats and Republicans, and representation matters. He said, you're going to have younger voters, women, people from Indian American, African American, and Asian American, looking and saying, here's somebody who looks like me, sounds like me. I can't begin to stress that for the United States to never have had a female in that role is almost unrealistic. Look at all the countries in the world that have already had females in their head roles. And this is the first female and the first Black female, which I think is amazing. And I think we all need to seriously think about what does she bring to the table and what the other candidate is bringing to the table. And so you can look at both and really honestly, really listen to your own consciousness and your own heart and your own mind. What do you want? Who do you want to lead this country? And what direction do you want it to go in? So the organizations have, as I said, 2.5 million members, and they're really have a very powerful force in getting young voters to come to the election too. Sarah Wiseman for Inside Higher Ed said that the top of the Democratic ticket has been met with enthusiasm from Black women, not least of all her sorors. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, it's sorors.
Soror, yeah.
Yes, sorors.
Yeah, that's what the AKA members call one another as their sorority sisters. The council also promotes interaction through forums, meetings, and other media for the exchange of information and engagement in cooperative programming and initiatives through various activities and functions. So they're not just there to support the vote. They're there in so many ways for their own communities and for the people that are needing them. The primary purpose and focus is really remaining around camaraderie and academic excellence for their members and service to the communities, as I said, that they serve. And each promotes awareness and action through educational, economic, and cultural service activities. Because they have to remain officially apolitical due to their nonprofit status, the presidents of all the 9 organizations issued a joint statement stating that they agreed to work jointly on an unprecedented voter registration, education, and mobilization coordinated campaign, noting that the effort would be nonpartisan. So individual members and informal networks created by the members of the organizations can also freely support whatever candidate that they choose. Their core values, I've mentioned a few. They also share the goal of educating and uplifting the Black community and fighting racial inequities. And the Divine Nine organizations were actually founded during a time when African Americans were denied many rights and privileges, and each was established on a predominantly white institution. The Black Greek letter organizations, or BGLOs, emerged during a period that is characterized as a low point in American race relations. And these associations were established on the principles of personal excellence, racial uplift, community service, civic action, and kinship. Their emergence coincided with significant national developments, including the rise of the Jim Crow laws, which I mentioned before, the popularity of scientific racism, and widespread racial violence and prejudice. What's amazing is that less than 24 hours after Joe Biden endorsed Kamala Harris to seek the Democratic nomination in his place, the group vowed to launch an unprecedented voter registration, education, and mobilization drive. And they have. I mean, they didn't just say they're going to do this. They have actually already, in the last 2 weeks, they have really actually accomplished this and are continuing to. So it's going to activate the thousands of chapters of members and the respective organizations to ensure a strong voter turnout in the communities that they do serve. So they get behind their own. They support their own, and they support others that may not be in that specific group. It's based around, and Divine Nine are really based on their shared values, scholarship, civic engagement, and community service. It's lobbied in the past for everything from federal anti-lynching legislation and women's suffrage to high school tutoring and financial aid opportunities for Black youth. And membership is for life. And feels almost very spiritual and very, it's like home. It's like coming home. Mm-hmm. And it makes you realize that your life on earth has more meaning than just your own selfish needs, that we are not here just to serve ourselves. We are here to serve others. And they really accomplish that. I think women are going to listen regardless of whatever color they are. a woman named is Barrett from Texas. And she said, everyone in Houston is very diverse. And women are going to pay attention for their daughters, who they're going to vote for, not just that Kamala is Black, but that who she is also is also very important. And her own history speaks for herself. So I'm just really impressed with what I have read and learned, and I was, when I was in college at Pitt, I mean, I was in a sorority, and all sorts of fraternities do have some of that camaraderie and that kind of connectedness, but I don't think they come close to what I've experienced and witnessed and read about that the Divine Nine actually have and continue to perpetuate throughout decades of these people's lives.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
is a forever home.
Yes. So I did want to go back and clarify Kamala Harris's educational background. She has a degree in political science from Howard University, and her law degree is from the University of California. So I can speak. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, as did Gail. And my experience with the Greek organizations, I did not pledge a particular sorority, but I was very well connected to Phi Beta Sigma because I chose to be a Sigma Soul. And essentially what that is each one of the brother organizations, if you will, has a sister organization. And so for the Phi Beta Sigma, it was the Sigma Souls. And we were sort of like in a support role. Like we would help the brothers when they were online and just different things like that. And so even when you're when you're on a college campus and you're not a member of a particular fraternity or sorority, you still get enveloped in that life because there's different layers, if you will, for you to be involved. Now, I made a very conscious choice that pledging a sorority was not something that I wanted, but I liked the Sigma Souls organization. So I became a part of that organization. And just on a personal level, the camaraderie that is there is just flat out amazing, number one. And number two, I'd be willing to bet, I don't know how much money, that most people in the white community, and maybe even beyond that, never heard of the Divine Nine until Kamala Harris was in the position that she was, that she is now in as the nominee for the Democratic Party and all of that. And so here's this whole extra other layer of Black history that so many people had no idea was even there. And so when you think about all of these educated Black people going to various universities, a lot of them at HBCUs, imagine the types of connections and relationships that grow out of that because you're connected in this type of way. And so it really is very, very powerful. And it's very gratifying to know that that kind of power is what is enabling this whole grassroots thing that we keep talking about, that there's a lot of power that is there, and we are using our power, not just within the context of like for selfish reasons, but to build up our community, to build up the nation, and to do something that has never been done before. And so all of this really speaks to the importance of the Black sororities and fraternities to professional life, to personal life, but now also in this very dramatic kind of way that is happening right now, that we have this incredible power. And it's time for us to go to break right now. And so when we come back, we will continue the conversation, and we're going to pass the baton over to Mavis, and she's going to talk to us about these grassroots Zoom activities that have been going on. So we'll be back in another minute or so. So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast and our community conversation. In today's episode, we have been discussing the spirit of change, freedom, opportunity, and justice. I'm going to pass the baton over to Mavis, and she's going to talk to us about this Grassroots Zoom after the Joe Biden announcement.
Oh, it's a good subject. But, first I wanted to say something about Gail's section on the Divine Nine. I have to admit, I had never heard of the Divine Nine in my whole life until this week. And as I listened to you describe it, Gail, I kept thinking about how peacefully and productively Black folks have responded to not being allowed into white sororities and fraternities. They formed their own, and now they're leading grassroots movements. It flies in the face of the old stereotype. I know a lot of people would have to admit this, that when Black people organize, there's something violent going to happen.
Yeah.
This is what Black people do. They organize to make their own communities better, to do what they see can be done, instead of waiting for anyone else's permission. Remember, Anita says, leave us alone. And, it's really a powerful, positive thing. So keep that in mind. Yeah, it's been so much fun to watch these Zoom meetings. Many of you are probably aware that, well, like Gail was saying, that right after Biden stepped down, or stepped out of the race, I should say, that the Black woman for Harris stepped right up and had this Zoom meeting of 44,000 people. You can just feel the liberal voices that just broke open in this country after Biden stepped out of the race. And I just want to say that I honor his service of, over 50 years in this country. I just am amazed at the idea that all of this energy was behind and kind of unseen, unheard, until he relinquished his role in the campaign. And it is so powerful. So in response to the Black woman for Kamala, was it? Anyway.
Actually, I just want to correct that.
Yeah,
it's
correct
actually a Win with Black Women call. It was the Win with Black Women that created the call and everything. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. I'm trying to memorize all these names. So white women stepped up, and their call was called White Women Answer the Call, Show Up for Kamala Harris. And during that call, 164,000 women logged on to Zoom. And their goal was to push white women, this is key, to recognize their privilege and the way that they have frequently failed to use it as political capital. The motivation was clear. This year, white women have the opportunity to elect and make other white women elect the first woman of color as president. This is huge. This is huge. And it's not just that Kamala is Black and a woman. This woman stands for so many of the values and the things that we are concerned about in our future, like we talked about. And I have to add my grandchildren into the mix, ladies, because the genocide survivors I've been working with in Rwanda are now adults, and they have married, and they have their own children. And those are, I call them my grandchildren. I am so proud of them. And what the decisions that we make in this country will affect them too, and every other country in the world. So just had to do that. The money came in so fast that the Democratic National Committee's fundraising site went down. How these people responded to this is amazing. And the group raised over $8.5 million. The person who led the white woman call is Shannon Watts. She's the founder for Moms Demand Action. Generally, they have been focused on gun control. I think she began after the Sandy Hook event, and really has her talent, has honed her talents to rally women, to take action. And she says she took her lead from the Black woman who first had the call. In fact, she worked with Jatoka Edie, I think her name is, the founder of Win with Black Women. Moms Demand Action is the largest grassroots group fighting gun violence in the US. All of these things are tying back to so many podcasts that we've done in the past, and it's exciting to see things coalesce for sure. Shannon said on Instagram, I think it's really important that women, white women, are willing to go through the transformational process of listening and learning. And, that's what we stand for here is you have to know yourself in order to transform and to really make a difference. She goes on to say, my role has become to help white women understand the political and economic power they have to make the world better for everyone. In fact, I learned that white women are the largest voting bloc, 39%. That is huge. Never hear about this. Yet many of these women, and a majority of these women in recent presidential elections, have voted in a way that upholds white supremacy. That's got to sink in. That is rough. A friend of Shannon Watts said, her name is Brittany Packett Cunningham. She says, your whiteness will not save you from what the patriarchy has in store for you. Your whiteness will not save you from what the patriarchy has in store for you. And this harkens back to the discussion we had about Project 2025, the views for women, the issues around birth control, and a whole slew of rights are at risk. Black women are the Democratic Party's most reliable voting bloc. 91% of Black women voted for Biden in 2020. Wow, we owe a debt of gratitude for sure. Watts channeled this key lesson from the work she did in gun violence, that gun violence prevention activism is a marathon and not a sprint, but it's also a relay race. Isn't that a great visual? That we will be handing off, the opportunity for someone to vote, help them vote. It's a handoff constantly. I think we get frozen when we think that there's too much of a burden to lift, that we have to give our whole lives to these things, but we each can do something. Of that, I am sure. She said after the call that night, she felt as if she had taken the baton from Black women. And then she adds, this is about unleashing your political power, your privilege, and making a plan to hold yourself accountable and to be in it for the long haul. The long haul is certainly something we have to think about, to stay aware, awake, and participating. One of the other great things about all of these voices coming together on Zoom is that Kamala Harris and her team have not set these Zoom calls up. They haven't had anything to do with them. They are organically coming to the fore. And there are so many different groups. Let me give my list. There was Black women, Hispanic women, Black men, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and the LGBT community. Winning campaigns are powered by real organic support, Harris said. I love that idea. It's not, nobody's ordering us. We're coming forth with our own values and participating. Let's see if there's anything else that I just have. I have these things in different colors. Oh yeah, so the word I wanted to say was the intersectionality of the different groups organically coming together. and being represented too in, in the policies that we want to put forward. She said, Shannon explains that no matter the outcome of the election, gun reform needs grassroots activism in the face of legislative inaction. Mm-hmm. And this to me is the same with racism. There are laws on the books, sure, about against discrimination, but the fact is many of them are not being enforced. So it's going to take those of us involved in grassroots movements to make sure that they're enforced or strengthened in some way. So anybody got some questions or comments they'd like to add to that part of it?
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to go back with the Shannon Watts and the Moms Demand Action. She's and I'm pretty sure that may have been someone else who made this particular connection, but out of most of the people that I have read about who do the work in the gun violence arena, she's the first white woman that I'm aware of who acknowledged the disproportionality of the impact on communities of color. That was one of the things that she really called out. So when you look at it, her work through that lens, it dovetails very nicely with what's happening in some of the other spaces, particularly when it comes to the Black community and all of that. So I was really impressed when I saw that she, in her work, literally recognizes that is a major issue, which makes, like I said, that's a way that she dovetails into this work that's going on over here. And then also, I don't want to leave out the white dudes. The white dudes for Harris. You forgot the white dudes for Harris.
Girl, I just didn't keep going. Yes.
According to, I believe, according to the resources that we have, or the sources that we have, they attracted 190,000. Wow. $4 million that they raised in 3 hours. And so one of the things that I find particularly interesting about all of this with the raising of the money and everything is that one of the things that Trump had said was he made this point of saying, well, Kamala Harris is now the pick, but she's not going to be allowed to use any of that money that people had donated for Joe Biden. But guess what? She didn't need it.
You won't need it.
She didn't need it. She didn't need it because look at the groundswell that is happening. And it's only been, 2 weeks? It hasn't even been like a full 2 weeks yet. And this is the response that is there.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to me.
Yes. And I do want to talk about the white dudes for Harris. I'm sorry. Yeah, there was another response. And I think it's interesting that they said white dudes, for Harris. I think they wanted to lighten up the labeling, the feeling around it. The organizer, whose last name is Rocketto, says throughout human history, a lot of time white men organized, it was with pointy hats on. Mm-hmm. So there's this sense of white men gathering.
Yes. Right.
That is, a little unnerving here. But the reason we're doing this is that the left has been ceding white men to the MAGA right for far too long. And he's saying that, the white men need to have their own voice and have it amplified here. This organizer used a lot of funny euphemisms. He called it a low melanin Veep steaks. He was talking about, and it says the power of, let's see here. Oh, it says we're a rainbow of beige. And they just had fun with it. And that shows some humility that I thought was really, really wonderful. The organizer says that, of course, MAGA confidence is not completely unfounded, but I'll tell you, man, something smells different this time around. You can see it when you close your eyes. He's utterly enthralled with the potential to deliver a mortal wound to this disgraceful chapter in American politics. Boy, that nails it. That nails it. White dues for Harris' cause grows stronger every day. This is interesting too. One of the more interesting aspects about the white dudes for Harris stream was how the speakers resisted the desire to scold or lecture the assembled Caucasians about the many, many world historic crimes they have unleashed upon the face of the earth. The tone was positive, empathetic, and confident that white men are capable of goodness. Of course.
Yes.
Of course. So I just think the article really framed it well. The guys framed it well. And, we need to know what they're thinking too. We just, I'm just glad that they coalesced as well. Any comments further on that?
I thought it was pretty amazing when I read that. And again, I keep going back and keep repeating myself over the fact that this groundswell of grassroots activity, and it goes and it speaks to what Tellerico says about it's not the left or the right, it's the top or the bottom. And right now, the bottom is just energized beyond anything that I've ever seen. I've been voting ever since I turned 18 years old. I've shared before that my first person that I voted for was Jimmy Carter. And I've never, the closest experience that that comes to where I'm experiencing now was when Barack Obama was running for the president. But this is even bigger. This feels even bigger than that. Yeah. So it's actually very exciting. So our time is winding down at this point. Now, one of the things that we normally will do when we get towards the end of the show, and just sort of ponder this question, where do we go from here? But I'd like to put that question out there a little bit differently to anybody who is listening to this podcast right now, or you're listening to it later on or watching the video. Where do you go from here? Right? Have you thought about joining a Zoom call for Kamala Harris? Where are you in all of this? And so I think that's a question that I would put out there to our listeners to kind of think about. Yeah. What am I doing?
They don't have to be identified with any particular group. I was just on one of her calls, came in my email and signed up, and it's fun. It's exciting.
Gail, you had something you wanted to add?
Well, there's another group of population that I didn't talk much about was that's the youth of our country. And I just want to throw out something that they are really important. That is what we are doing this for. But within the majority of the 38,500 people who signed up on vote.org in the 2 days after Biden made his choice, that the majority of the people that signed up were under the age of 34, and more than 100,000 new voters have registered, and 84% of them are 18 to 34 years of age. That's significant, and that we really want to encourage everybody to be able to vote. And to whatever your choice is, I want you to make sure that you're doing all your research too, and that you're really, really looking at the truths of both sides, and to listen to what your own inner self and your consciousness is saying, whatever that choice may be. But know that you've done your work too.
Excellent.
I would like to give a quick shout out to an organization called Leaders We Deserve. It's run by David Hogg, and he was one of the survivors of the Marjorie Stoneman shooting.
Gotcha.
So they are all young people, all 20s and 30s, running for Senate or House. Yeah, they are very, very cool people. Maxwell Frost was one of their first, that they supported. So Leaders We Deserve.
Yeah. That's amazing. Leaders We Deserve. I like the sound of that. And so our call to action is Stay woke.
Mm.
And woke is an acronym for stay well informed, stay open minded, stay kind, and stay empathetic. Right?
Yes.
And then the second one is get prepared to vote. And vote is our acronym for voices organized to empower.
Perfect.
We are at a point in history that we have never seen before. And all of us in this country are obligated to do those two things, stay woke and be prepared to vote, because this is probably the single most important election that we have had in a long, long time. So this whole idea of being on this precipice of change, that is where we are. And we all have a role to play in bringing about something different for this country and for all of those little 4-year-olds out there, or those 6-month-olds out there, or those 12-year-olds out there who one day are going to either reap the benefit or reap the hardship
consequences
of what we decide to do in this particular election.
Every choice has a consequence. Every choice.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
think about who you're going to vote for. Don't
Mhm.
vote because your parents vote a certain way or
Do
your
your own
vote
research.
a certain way. Think about that person. Learn about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and check your values.
Absolutely. Mhm. And that's why I specifically said be prepared to vote.
Mhm.
Do your research, do your homework, make
Mhm.
the choice. Okay. So we are literally just about completely out of time. And I want to go to our closing quote. And our closing quote is actually from Vice President Kamala Harris. There is a lot of work to be done to make sure our leaders reflect the people they are supposed to represent. The more diverse a group of decision makers is, the more informed the decision will be. Until we achieve full representation, we all should understand we are falling short of the ideals of our country. Those are some powerful words, very powerful words. And as always, we relate this all the way back to the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? And the ultimate question is based on your personal accountability and how you define yourself as a member of a society and as a leader. What will you do to ensure that Cairo and his contemporaries have that birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which they were born? We all have a role to play. And this election is very indicative of the fact that we all have a role to play. So get out there, be prepared, stay woke, and all
Vote.
that. So yes. So I want to thank you for joining us on Inflection Point Podcast here on Transformation Talk Radio. We are here every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, as we continue with our community conversation. So we'll see you at the next episode. Thank you for listening to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. The journey towards anti-racism and social change doesn't stop here. Truth, reconciliation, and healing come from ongoing, open, honest, and deliberate conversations. Continue to dive in and deconstruct your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as we band together to manifest social change. Tune in to Inflection Point Podcast every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on TransformationTalkRadio.com for more conversations about how we can cultivate change from the inside out.